Welcome and good morning to all of you out there participating in our devotional series. Today's reading is out of Genesis chapter 9. And remember, in Genesis 8, Noah and his family left the ark and built an altar to God. And now in Genesis 9, we see life after the great deluge, and it was very different. The water canopy that covered the earth was now gone, and this meant that the protection from the rays of the sun were no longer blocked. The perfect environment and temperatures that made those lush green gardens was no more, and that decay and dying would work in a way much, much faster than seen in the pre-flood world. In fact, the average age of men in the Bible before the flood was 900 years old. Just one generation into this post-flood world, and that number drops to 400 years. And just a few generations later, it goes to 200 years and so on. This was not the world that they lived in before. Now, the first 17 verses of this chapter are God's word to Noah and his family. And these verses contain the basic provision for human government among men and the Noahic covenant, which is still in effect today, and thank God that it is. As the chapter opens, the flood waters have receded, and Noah and his family have walked out of the ark into an empty world. What God had created and called good was destroyed by the work of sins. It's the nature of sin to destroy, to corrupt, and to pervert the things God calls good. No life is able to escape or be safe from the effects of sin. And it's here in this very first verse that God calls something out of Noah and his family. Let's go ahead and read Genesis 9 verse 1. It says this: "Then God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, 'Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth.'" Period. Now, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? That is very close to the very same thing that God told Adam and Eve. Let's go ahead and look at the difference, because there's actually a big difference between what God told Noah and what God told Adam and Eve. So let's run back to Genesis 1, verse 28. God blessed them, and God said to them, sounds exactly the same as Noah, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth." And keeps going with Adam. "Subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the sky and over every living thing that moves on the earth." There's a big difference between what God told Adam and what God told Noah. The dominion and authority that God gave Adam changed with Noah. The harmony that existed in nature with Adam and Eve and what they enjoyed was now gone. The old covenant was being reinstated in this new covenant, but with the reflections of a new situation. In fact, in verse 2 of Genesis 9, God says that he put a fear of man upon all the living creatures of the earth, meaning that man was no longer to exercise direct authority over the animals, and there was to be fear manifest by animals instead of obedience and understanding. And remember, animals tend to multiply much faster than humans, and the fast-growing number of animals could have been a threat to the future of human life. But there's another difference that we encounter. Animals were, for the first time ever, are you ready, authorized for use as food. And what a blessing that has been. And right here in Genesis 9, we find the first Outback Steakhouse, right there. People use the fact that God told Adam and Eve to eat of the fruits and vegetables in the garden to mean that being a vegetarian is God's choice for us. Right here, it can't be stated any clearer. God told us to eat the animals. It's no more godly to be a vegetarian than it is to eat meat. And we don't know exactly why God made this change, but perhaps the more rigorous environment in the new world would require that animal protein and meat be used for man's subsistence to a degree that it didn't need to be used in the pre-flood world. The one restriction God put down was not to eat meat with blood in it. And what that means is that after they have killed an animal, they had to drain the blood from it before they could cook it and eat it. From there, God moved on to talk about the shedding, not just of animal blood, but of human blood. The human race had a really bad record for this one. Cain had killed his brother Abel. Lamech had killed a young man. And in Genesis 6, we read that the earth was full of all kinds of violence. Before the flood, there was no formal arrangement for human government. There was no formal mechanism for the punishments of crime or even a capital crime of murder. And we see through the stories of Cain and Lamech that each person was able to act quite independently of all restraints except for those of his own conscience. And this eventually led to the violence and anarchy we see before the flood. To prevent the similar situation from happening after the flood, God established right here the institution of human government, including the authority for capital punishment. So now that God had put the fear of man in animals, like we found out in verse 2, he was going to put the fear of God in man when it came to humans killing humans. Let me read to you right now Genesis 9, verse 6. Whoever shed human blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made mankind. Those who kill other humans will have to answer to God because humans are made in the image of God. To attack another human is to attack God's image. In fact, to take a life means to take the place of God. The killer becomes his own God, and it's interesting because it follows Adam and Eve's great sin, doesn't it? It wasn't the fruit that was the root of the problem. It was the fact that they tried to become their own God. From there, the narrative shifts to the covenant that God is about to make. If you look in verse 9, and this covenant goes quite a bit after that, the covenant was not just made to Noah, but with every human that is descended from Noah, as well as all of the animal kingdom. The promise God makes is to never produce another worldwide flood to destroy the face of the earth. In the Noahic covenant, God put the rainbow in the sky as a proof or a token that he would never flood the entire earth again. Many of the promises in the Bible are conditional promises. And that means they're conditional on if we do this, then God will do this, but not this covenant. This rainbow, however, it's not conditional. He put it all on himself rather on man's obligation. Every time we see a rainbow, we should remember this promise that God made to us, the covenant that God reinstated with us, and thank him that we are covered by his covenant. I hope you guys enjoyed Genesis 9 as much as I did, and I can't wait to see you guys in further chapters.